opening up our hearts to the message today that's going to be presented by our dear Michael Kolbeck, who is the proud father of 3 beautiful adult daughters. He is an ordained minister and a practicing Reiki master. He is seeking to live his truth in all its varied ways and believes that the greatest precept of all is to know thyself. Today he will be speaking on the topic, Rise Again, Living the Truth of Who You Are. Please welcome Michael Kolbeck.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning. All right, just give me one moment here. You know how I like to talk, so the best thing is to have a little helper here with me. All right. Rise again. So these 2 words would not leave my being. It would not leave my mind. Along with this image of a phoenix bursting forth into new life, up from the ashes of old. It was interesting because this came about around a month or so after leaving my 15-year marriage. And I never had any fascination with the phoenix throughout my life. At least not that I recall. But for reasons mostly unknown, these 2 words, rise again, and this image was all I could think about. So much so that within a few months after leaving the marriage, I also got a nice big tattoo here on my leg. Some of you have probably seen it in the summer. It's a huge phoenix rising up out of the ashes of everything that was. It's strong, it's fierce, it's powerful, it's majestic, and it's sovereign. As time went on, I began to look at the mythology of the phoenix. Like you and I, the phoenix is immortal. The process of bursting into flame and being reborn from the ashes is not just a one and done, but a continual cycle. One of the other things I love about a phoenix is they can carry immense loads, far longer than they should be able to, and far heavier as well. For those of you who like Harry Potter, right? Just think of the Chamber of Secrets. Just think of Fox, the Phoenix, as he comes up out of the chamber at the end, and he's carrying Professor Lockhart, and Ron and Hermione, and Harry and Jenny, all of them in tow, right? It's a huge, heavy load. But the Phoenix does it with such ease. The Phoenix's tears have healing powers. And in association as well with the power of healing is the power of regeneration. Not only for self, but for others as well. Phoenixes are creatures of immense strength. And they're about healing, about regeneration. I still find myself looking at this image from time to time. This is actually the first time I've ever really shared it with anybody. But I find it very curious how it really came out of nowhere for me. And ironically, it's kind of been a mantra for me ever since. See, by the time I left my second marriage back in early 2017, during its 15th year, I was exhausted. Utterly exhausted from carrying the load for so long, with all of that giving and all of that doing, receiving little to no reciprocation, only enough to keep me choosing in. Somewhere around the 13th year, I had a conversation with my wife where I was explicitly asking for her help. I remember that conversation for some reason so vividly. But the fact was, I just didn't have anything left to give. At least that's what it felt like. And as I poured out my heart, something that I did not do very often anymore from previously learned lessons in that marriage, she stood there and she stared at me. There was no look of support, no affection, none of that. She just stood there and stared at me. And after I finished talking, she raised her chin. She gave me a smug look. And she turned around and she walked out of the room. And my heart sank even lower. You see, it was one of those moments where I felt like I was drowning. And I reached out my hand to that one person that I loved so dearly. And that person just turns and walks away. Leaving you to your own fate. And the fact was, it wasn't just my fate. We had a family, we had a home, we had all the things, right? Over the next year and a half, the relationship, which had changed overnight when the words were said, I do, all those years before, over the next year and a half, it would turn into betrayals and nightmares that I had never dreamed of. And that is saying something. Especially seeing as how the wife of my first marriage of 4 years back in the 90s, for those of you who know me, you know I'm not very fond of the 90s. This just plays right in with it. But back in that marriage of 4 years in the 90s there, I was saying something because I had met this woman at Christian college, right? And we got married, we did the thing, we were going to church, we were doing all the stuff. She ends up not only having an affair, but getting pregnant with another man's child. And after that experience, I kind of thought to myself, once I recovered from it a little bit, there was this part of me that was like, oh, I felt kind of excited. Because it was like, okay, now that is something, right? So if I've been through that, then I really can't think of anything much worse in terms of romantic type betrayals and things. But I was way wrong. So, even though the last year and a half was bringing such tremendous circumstances in that second marriage, I continued to carry the load. Even though I was exhausted, I continued to carry the load. But the pain finally became too unbearable. And what I had discovered, what I had kind of known all along, but really came to the surface in that last year and a half, told me the type of person I was married to and why everything had changed the moment that we had said, I do. Now, it would be absolutely unfair of me and unaware of me to cast full blame on the other person. I had to accept my part in this dynamic. Yes, it was me, the people-pleasing, codependent, loyal to everyone but himself person. I had to look at what I was bringing to the table in these dynamics that were playing out. The truth is, this pattern of highly dysfunctional relationships and betrayals, it had occurred all throughout my adult life in these particular types of settings, in these romantic type settings. And the fact is, they were continually getting worse. So a few months before I left that second marriage, I was searching everywhere for help. I was doing all the work on myself that I could, and I ended up in Weekends Men Retreat in late 2016. I had never done anything like this before. It was just me and 7 other guys from who knows where, with their own stories and their own mess of things going on. And that 3-day weekend was a huge turning point for me, because it shook me up. And it had me come face to face with the feelings and some of the realities that I didn't want to look at. It brought me face to face with that pain and the anger that I had buried for so long, and it reminded me that I have a choice. It reminded me that most of what I was living in were stories. Stories the way I wanted it to be, but it wasn't truth. It wasn't the reality of what was. And after returning back home, I had to face the hard reality. I had a simple decision to make. Seems simple in black and white. I either accept what is, and accept this life of betrayal, affairs, and deceit, and all the other stuff that was going along with it, a life that is empty of genuine love and care and reciprocation and support, or I leave. Working on it wasn't an option at this point. I've been doing that the whole time. And during the last year and a half, that was just brought to the surface even more, that was not an option. Over the next couple months, I secretly met with a therapist, planned an exit strategy, and in February 2017, I left. And in doing so, I metaphorically set myself on fire. I had to leave behind all that was most sacred to me. Now, this cycle of death and rebirth would occur a number of times in the years to come, as I would dive deep into healing the wounds within. And yet each time I burst into flames, it was immensely painful. We see these things in these movies, these mythological depictions of the phoenix bursting into flames. And it looks very fascinating to watch. And yet when you look at that, and you look at that as yourself, being the phoenix, we all know it's not all nice and pretty. It's not this great grand image that we see on a movie screen or something. It is extremely painful. When you burst into flames, you're choosing to let go of everything that you had identity in. You're leaving behind dreams and hopes that would never come to fruition. I was leaving behind all that I had known for 15 years, and truly, if you want to get right down to it, all I had known for my whole life. To embrace the unknowns of something new. And I remember driving that car, pulling out of the driveway of my home for the last time, and although I was crying tears of pain, it was as though Spirit was pulling me along, leading me down this new path that I had chosen. I didn't realize it at the time, but I was in the crucible, that fire of transformation, watching everything disappear in the rearview mirror. Now the phoenix knows that fire is essential for burning away all that is no longer needed. Because without the ashes of what was, there can be no rebirth. The phoenix is reborn from its own ashes. Each of us is the phoenix. Each time we burst into flame and go through this transformation, we are reborn from the ashes of ourselves. You see, the burning down isn't a burning down of all of the things in our external world. It's actually a burning down of our internal world here. Of all the beliefs, the rules, the ways of being, the identities. It's a burning down of everything within us. You see, in order for me to finally gather the strength to leave and and pull away knowing that I would never return, I had to surrender. We see the same surrender in the life of the phoenix. As it reaches its time of death, it gathers different spices. It creates a nest for itself. And then when it's ready, the phoenix itself sets itself on fire. It's not some external thing. The phoenix actually consciously chooses to do that. A fire that consumes its very being as it surrenders to all that it ever knew. I want you to take a moment and just think about the immense amount of strength that it takes to surrender, to let go, to metaphorically set yourself on fire. The strength that it takes to accept the truth of what is. The strength it takes to look at that and then say, okay, what was my part in this dynamic? To let go of identities that you have wrapped up in so much. To let go of dreams and hopes. To feel what you don't want to feel. To acknowledge what you don't want to acknowledge. And the immense amount of strength it takes to decide not to carry certain loads anymore. The strength it takes to surrender completely. Not only allowing yourself to go through the fire of refinement, but having the courage and the strength to set yourself alight. And then to be able to have the strength to rise again. To rebuild yourself. And it is my wholehearted belief that everyone listening to this has that strength, has experienced this in some way, shape, or form in your life. You see, each time I would rise again, a part of the old was gone. A part of that old programming that wasn't supporting me any longer was gone. And it didn't magically just disappear. A lot of it disappeared through new practices, through choosing new ways of being. Each time I would rise again, I was rising more and more into the truth of who I am. Less and less dependent on people's thoughts of me or on receiving validation from them. There's a certain word I will not say in here, but there's a certain word that I'll say to my mom every now and then. It's a curse word, of course. Just because it's a very powerful word. And it's a word that she does not like her little boy to say, even though I'm 53 years old.
Others are like that.
But it's part of that. It's part of that coming to that awareness and coming to that place where you no longer seek validation from anybody else. You're just allowed to live and be who you are, and that's a beautiful and wonderful thing. And every time that you rise again from the ashes, you will rise again into more and more of that truth of who you are. Each time I rose again, I felt stronger, I felt lighter, I felt more freedom. Coming to a place that I now refer to as sovereign. You see, transformation is truly an unbecoming. It's not about going out there and becoming something that you are not. It's really about burning away everything that you are not. You see, for me, it was time to let go of always being loyal to another person regardless, with having very little loyalty for myself. It was time to let go of having no boundaries. It was time to let go of everything being my responsibility. It was time to respect myself and let go of minimizing my own worth, my own value, and my own sacredness. Just like the phoenix, each time we rise again, we're a new creature. We are a new and better version of ourselves. Each time we rise again, we're stronger, more powerful than we were before. Each time we rise again, we know thyself that much better. I think back about 8 years, 8, 9, 10 years now, I just kind of go like, I didn't know myself at all. I knew certain things about me, but I did not have the fortitude, the strength, the courage to act on those things, because it would jeopardize what was already there in different relationships in my life. And so I just basically would live under the shoulds and the supposed tos and the scripts that were embedded in me. And as I look back on that, I think, man, what a beautiful thing it is now to be able to say, yeah, I'm not perfect. I'm far from perfect. But it is so nice to be able to say, I'm me. And I get to live as me. And I get to show up as me. And that is a freedom that you just cannot, I don't even know how to explain that freedom, really. See, just like the phoenix, each time we rise again, not only do we know ourselves that much better, but we're more humble than we were before. I used to think I had all the answers. Now it's almost hard getting up here speaking at times because I'm like, what am I supposed to tell you people? I don't know anything. What am I supposed to share with them? Each time we rise again, we remember things about ourselves that we already knew. I love that one. At each time we rise again, we are more conscious. I know I am. I am way more conscious of what loads am I willing to pick up and carry. And if I'm picking up that load and carrying it, there better be an end in sight. I'm not carrying that thing indefinitely. And if I need some help carrying that, I'm going to ask for help. And if nobody's going to help, I'm not carrying it. We go back to each time we rise again, we rise more into living the truth of who we are. Of just allowing ourselves to be ourselves. There's a saying out there that says, we spend so much time worried about what other people think about us. Which is, that's pretty much the first 45 years or so of my life, for sure. And yet, they're all worried about the same thing. So really, nobody's as worried about you as you think they are. Which brings us back to, it's just best to live who you are. And if you lose certain relationships and certain things over it, so be it. Because the most important thing is you living in the truth of who you are, is you living authentically as you. I couldn't live in the truth of who I was back then because I wasn't willing to face the truths that were before me. I mean, they were presenting themselves in so many different ways on the canvas of my life. And they finally presented them enough, with enough different faces and enough different places, that I was like, oh, wait a minute. The same thing keeps happening. Same thing keeps getting worse. A lot worse. I'm not doing this anymore. But, there's one person that was there in all of that, which was me. Doesn't mean it was my responsible. I'm not responsible for these other person's behaviors or anything like that. But it does say, okay, there's something in here that is allowing and entering into these kind of relationships and continuing to stay in them. And I had to come to a recognition of myself in that. So some may say, why do you share such things about your life? And isn't that just a little bit of living in the past? Or what good does that do to share things like that? And of course, I didn't go into all the details. You just kind of got the glossed overview. But my answer is simply because they are real. And they were the experiences that set me free. There are days and moments still when I just, I'll have angst about something that happened back then. And it's just another piece of me that's coming out that's ready to let's look at this piece. Right? But these are the experiences. Without those experiences, I would not be where I am. And I am super, super thankful for where I am. I think about, had I not endured those experiences, I would still be living this false life, basically. Just kind of wandering around, doing my thing, punching my time card, whatever it is. And I would be inside miserable. Because the truth is, I pretty much was. I just thought, well, this is what everybody does, right? It was through those past experiences that I came to realize not only did I have the strength to survive and carry such heavy loads in the worst of circumstances, but I also had the ability to heal myself, to help others and recognize that not only is there a strength built for survival, but there is a strength that goes much deeper. A strength that gives us the ability to surrender ourselves into that fire of transformation, and then to have the fortitude to rise again out of that. See, rise again is about reconciling with self. It's all about redemption and salvation. It's not out there. It's all in here. It's about coming home to yourself so that you may live authentically the truth of who you are. As we leave here today, as we each go out into our own lives, allow your being to remind you of the profound transformations that you have been through. Of the times when you made those hard decisions to surrender. To remind you of the immense amount of strength that you have. And ironically, it doesn't show up until we actually need it. And to remind you that with each moment and each decision, you have the ability to live more fully in the truth of who you are as a powerful and sovereign being. And one more question that you might want to ask yourself today is, what loads am I carrying? Should I carry that load any longer? Should I ask for somebody to help me carry this load? Sometimes the best things that we can do is just set the load down. If the load feels really, really heavy, then maybe just set it down. The truth is, you can always pick it back up. If that's what you decide, you can always pick it back up. But sometimes we think we just have to keep carrying and keep carrying and keep carrying. Even though everything in our being is saying, can you give me a rest, please? To rise again, which each of us has done in our own ways, it takes a strength beyond what we think we are capable of. It takes the courage to surrender, and it takes the faith in something beyond the known. The faith that when we do surrender into the unknown, that we will surely rise again.
Thank you so much, Michael. That was definitely a resonant message for me, and I heard some nods and sighs in the crowd that we resonated with that. If you would